Greetings. So while I'm working on the final draft of the short novel The Carriers, I'm going to read from the list of the rules of burden. In this story, there is this list of rules that everyone is supposed to live by. It's something of a matter of faith. It's a matter of order, matter of regulation of the behavior of the people living in the catacombs in this story. And they're called the rules of burden. The thing about these rules of burden is some rules repeat themselves, but they're just the same rule written in a different way. Some rules contradict each other, but that's the nature of the arbitrary state. Some rules contradict other rules, but you're supposed to follow those rules regardless. And that's how these rules of burden are treated here. And the setting of the story is like so many dystopian pieces of fiction. An event in the past occurs and sends this community of people underground, where they burrow into old foundations and craft what they can from what they find. There's ruins, but the ruins at the point the story takes place, most of the ruins are so worn out and decayed that there's very little that they can craft from what they find. The catacombs are buried deep underground. There is no history, no written history. Very few in the catacombs know what words are as they're written. They're just squiggles and shapes that they find on scraps of paper that haven't rotten away. Most things are word of mouth, carried from person to person verbally rather than written down. This is exaggerated by the fact that the only way to write things down is with a stick drawing in the dirt. But then again, since written language has been cleaned from their mind, very few bother to use sticks in such a way. So it's a very dystopian, dark future. The ground above is blasted clean. It's a desert, rocks. It's a wasteland. Very few animals, and at this point, the context of animals for these people, they're like monsters. They're rarely ever seen, and it breeds, every time they're seen, whatever these creatures are, it brings terror into the minds of whoever sees them. It's the notion of a community of people living under the ground, but isolated from the earth in such a way that they don't understand what's going on. But they live, and they exist. And they live by the rules of burden. And I'll read these rules of burden off as sets of 10, give or take. And they're written in a specific order here. They're not in order here as they are in the novel. In the novel, the rules of burden are more situated in context with the subject matter of the chapter, with what's going on in the chapter. So there's a correlating rules of burden because one citizen of the catacombs will remind someone else they might be violating this rule of burden or that rule of burden over here or that rule of burden over there. So they got to keep everyone in check, keep each other in check. So, that being said, the first rule of burden. The rules of burden have no final number, no end count, as the burdens of man are infinite. The second rule of burden. All human beings are better under a burden. The third rule of burden is that all human beings require some rest, that, as a utility, he does not exhaust himself into uselessness. The fourth rule of burden. Even the most sublime beast of burden needs games to mollify the anguish of existence. This fourth rule of burden will be clear because there are an assortment of games in the catacombs that keep these fellows occupied. And that's one other thing too, is there's such a level of atomization between individuals that this particular community is all male, and it's a control factor. And each individual male is atomized from the other. They have no idea where they come about. There's no specific sense of identity. If there is an identity in these individuals, it's them as a utility alone. As a human being, they're a tool. So any other identifying characteristic, any other kind of identity in these characters, there is very little, and it's some of the characters develop their own personalities and their own characters, but it's quite frowned upon by the authority. You're supposed to maintain yourself as a utility and your usefulness to the community as a whole. So, and this will be explained on through the rules of burden. The fifth rule of burden is that every man is another man's brother, if by blood, by bonds of the state, by bonds of death. Where a brother asks you, no matter the anguish, humiliation, or inconvenience, you must always give permission. The sixth rule of burden is, the sickness of greed is the sickness of the body. The seventh rule of burden is, no man shall be greater than his brother, not in war or in contest, neither in fury nor in death. And this specific rule will cater to the idea of competition in the games, where some of these rules of burden are suspended for the sake of the games. And the games are designed to mediate any kind of angst or aggression or any kind of extreme emotion that one of the characters might be feeling. So they express that in the competition of the games, and they exhaust that negative emotion. The eighth rule of burden is that all human beings need food without the sacrifice of other living things to live. The ninth rule of burden is, some manner of disobedience must be allowed for the most steadfast rebel, to foster in them the illusion of liberty. Otherwise, the rebellious drive will fester and foment beyond the capacity for it to be contained. The 10th rule of burden is, the death of a man fortifies the state, one extra mouth no longer to feed, one more dependent lain to rest. So those are the first 10 rules of burden. There will be more explanations and little pieces of information on the story as it evolves and as the rules of burden are explained. Thank you for watching.